The Waterbury demon. When oppression turned physical, a Connecticut family faced escalating attacks from something inhuman that moved from shadows to physical violence in their own home. Winter settles over Waterbury, Connecticut in 1979 with a particular heaviness, and inside a modest two-story house on a quiet working-class street, something begins to make itself known. Thomas and Marie Callahan and their 3 children have lived here for 6 years without incident, without fear, without any sense that the walls around them might harbor something that watches and waits. But in those winter months, the atmosphere inside their home transforms. A weight descends at night, pervasive and deliberate, pressing down on the family as they try to sleep. What begins as discomfort evolves into something far more sinister, and the Callahans find themselves confronting a presence that defies every rational explanation they attempt to construct. The entity does not announce itself with spectacle. There are no thrown objects in those first weeks, no voices echoing through empty rooms. Instead, it makes itself known through sensation, through the visceral experience of being touched by something unseen. Thomas Callahan wakes one night to find himself completely paralyzed, pinned to his bed by a crushing pressure on his chest. He cannot move his arms or legs. He cannot open his mouth to call for help. He can only lie there in the darkness, fully conscious, feeling the weight of something pressing down on him with deliberate force. When it releases him, he gasps for air and sits up in the darkness, his heart hammering, telling himself it was sleep paralysis, a medical phenomenon, nothing more. But it happens again, and then a third time. Each occurrence follows the same pattern: full consciousness, complete paralysis, crushing weight. And with each episode comes a smell that Thomas struggles to describe to his wife the next morning. Sulfur, he says at first. Then he corrects himself, rotting meat. Then something else, something electrical, like ozone after lightning strikes close by. Marie listens to her husband and sees the fear in his eyes, and she knows this is not imagination. She has smelled it too, faintly, in the hallway outside their bedroom. Their children have mentioned it, wrinkling their noses at dinner, asking what that weird smell is. The children see the shadow figure first. Their youngest daughter mentions it casually, the way children do when they have not yet learned that some things should frighten them. There is a man in the corner of her room at night, she tells her mother. But when Marie asks what he looks like, her daughter hesitates. He is dark, she says, darker than the dark, and he is shaped wrong. Her brother confirms the sightings independently, describing the same figure in the same corner of his own room. When pressed for details, he cannot articulate what makes the shape wrong, only that its proportions do not match anything human, that looking at it makes his eyes hurt, that he has learned to pull his blanket over his head and squeeze his eyes shut until morning comes. Marie Callahan finds the scratch marks on a Tuesday morning while putting away laundry. Inside the closet door in the upstairs hallway, deep gouges score the wood. They are deliberate, arranged in patterns she does not recognize. She has not made these marks. She questions her children carefully, gently, and they deny any knowledge. The scratches are too deep, too uniform to have been made by accident. She runs her fingers along them and feels a chill that has nothing to do with the temperature. Something made these marks from inside the closet. By February, the situation has accelerated beyond what the family can rationalize or endure. Thomas Callahan sits in the confessional at his parish church and tells his priest everything. He describes the nightly attacks, the paralysis, the crushing weight. He describes the shadow figure his children see. He describes the scratches and the smell and the pervasive sense that something in his house hates him specifically, targets him deliberately. The priest listens and feels his own fear rising, because he recognizes these patterns from his seminary training, from the lectures on diabolic activity that most priests hope never to apply in practice. He knows the Warrens by reputation. He makes the call that same afternoon. Ed and Lorraine Warren arrive on a gray February day when the sky presses low over Waterbury like a lid on a pot. They have been investigating cases of demonic oppression throughout Connecticut for more than a decade, building case files, documenting patterns, learning to distinguish between hauntings that can be explained and those that require intervention of a different kind. Ed carries his audio recording equipment and his camera. Lorraine carries something less tangible but more essential, the clairvoyant sensitivity that allows her to perceive what others cannot. The moment Lorraine crosses the threshold of the Callahan home, she feels it. The oppression is immediate and unmistakable. This is not residual energy, not the echo of past trauma lingering in wood and plaster. This is not an intelligent haunting, not a human spirit attempting communication. This is demonic presence, active and intentional. She moves through the house methodically, allowing her sensitivity to guide her, and finds the strongest concentration in the kitchen. Near the back door, a cold spot persists regardless of external temperature. Lorraine stands in that spot and feels the heaviness concentrate around her, pressing against her awareness like something testing for weakness. Ed Warren sits down with Thomas Callahan and conducts a detailed interview, documenting the timeline with the precision of someone who understands that patterns matter. The attacks on Thomas began monthly, then increased to weekly, then accelerated to nearly nightly over the preceding 2 months. This escalation is significant. Ed has seen this pattern before. An entity that moves from monthly attacks to nightly attacks is an entity in the process of escalating from oppression towards something more dangerous. Possession does not happen instantly. It is a process, a progression, and the Callahan family is further along that progression than they realize. The most serious incident occurred the week before the Warrens' arrival. Thomas Callahan was alone in the basement, checking the furnace on a cold afternoon. Something struck him from behind with tremendous force, sending him into the concrete wall hard enough to crack 2 ribs. He was alone. There was no one else in the basement. In the instant before impact, he heard something, not a voice, but a vibration felt more than heard, emanating from inside the walls themselves. He pulled himself up, clutching his side, and fled the basement. He has not gone back down alone since. Lorraine Warren identifies this event as the crossing point. The entity has moved from psychological and psychic attack into direct physical intervention. It has demonstrated the capacity for serious bodily harm. The danger is no longer theoretical. She tells the family plainly, without softening her words, that they are past the stage where prayer alone will suffice. The house requires formal exorcism, conducted by ordained clergy with the authority to command the entity to depart. Ed Warren coordinates with the parish priest and brings in a second priest from the Diocese of Hartford. Exorcism of a location is not performed lightly. It requires preparation, ritual, and the cooperation of the family who will remain in the home afterward. The ritual requires 3 sessions conducted over 2 weeks. During the first session, the priests bless each room, commanding any unholy presence to depart in the name of divine authority. The atmosphere in the house shifts, but does not break. The entity is entrenched. The second session brings the breakthrough. Thomas Callahan is present throughout, kneeling with his family as the priests move through the house with holy water and prayer. At the moment the officiating priest commands the entity to depart, speaking the words of exorcism with full ecclesiastical authority, Thomas feels the pressure on his chest lift. It has been present almost continuously for 2 months, a constant weight he has learned to carry, and suddenly it is gone, completely. The relief is so sudden and so complete that he begins to weep. The cold spot in the kitchen dissipates. The shadow figure does not appear in the children's rooms that night, or the next night, or any night thereafter. By the third session, conducted as a final blessing and sealing of the home, the Warrens consider the house clear. Ed Warren documents the case in his files with careful notation. The demonic presence had achieved a level of physical access that placed the family in genuine danger of serious harm. Intervention came at the last responsible stage before that danger became unmanageable. The Waterbury demon case becomes a reference point in Ed Warren's lectures on the stages of demonic oppression. He uses it specifically to illustrate physical manifestation, the point at which an entity escalates from psychological torment to direct bodily harm. This crossing point, Ed explains to audiences, is what separates a haunting that might resolve on its own from one that requires formal exorcism. Thomas Callahan's account of the basement attack becomes a centerpiece of these lectures, the testimony of a man who experienced that escalation firsthand. The Callahan family remains in their home after the exorcism. They do not flee. They do not sell. They reclaim their house from the presence that invaded it, and they report no further disturbances. The atmosphere lightens. The children sleep without fear. Thomas Callahan no longer wakes in the night to crushing weight and the smell of sulfur. In the early 1980s, he becomes a regular attendee at the Warrens' lectures, willing to stand before audiences and describe what he lived through. His testimony carries weight because it comes from lived experience, from someone who faced the reality of demonic oppression and survived with his faith and his family intact. The case files remain in the Warren collection, documentation of a family who recognized danger, reached out for help, and received intervention before the situation progressed beyond recovery. The Waterbury demon serves as both warning and instruction. Entities that demonstrate physical manifestation require immediate and formal response. The progression from oppression to possession follows identifiable stages, and intervention at the correct stage can prevent escalation into genuine spiritual emergency. Waterbury moves on. The house on that quiet street stands unremarkable among its neighbors. The Callahan family lives their lives, but the documentation remains, preserved in case files and lecture recordings, testimony to the reality that some presences cannot be explained away, and that recognition of danger is the first step toward deliverance. If you found this case compelling, subscribe to Vanishing Roads for more documented paranormal investigations from around the world. This story was created with AI assistance based on documented case files. All events reference real investigations and reported incidents.